Welcome to HFY Stories. If you're ready for jaw-dropping stories and a universe full of excitement, hit that subscribe button like it's the big red button in a space opera. Give us a like if you're feeling that interstellar vibe and comment below to join the conversation. The arrival on Earth. The Galactic Empire's elite hunting guild, known as the Kriegstall, had scored the universe for formidable prey, pitting their skills against creatures that roamed the wilds of countless worlds. They wore their victories like badges of honor, boasting about their conquests at the grand feasts held in the marble halls of their home planet, Jantor. To these hunters, Earth's reputation was nothing more than a mere footnote, a small blue planet inhabited by soft creatures hardly worth their attention. That perception changed with the news of a predator so fierce that it dominated its ecosystem with unrivaled strength, the polar bear. Stories of this massive, white-furred beast prowling the icy lands of the north sparked the Kriegstall's curiosity. Led by Captain Xarath, a seasoned hunter known for his unyielding bravado, a party of 10 was dispatched to Earth, eager to add this apex predator to their trophy collection. Upon arrival, their sleek, silver ship descended through the atmosphere, breaking the clouds over the Arctic. The landscape was a vast, undulating stretch of white, dotted with icebergs and the occasional sight of seals lounging on the ice. The Kriegstall hunters were outfitted in advanced exosuits designed to withstand extreme temperatures, and each carried an array of sophisticated weaponry that had felled creatures far larger and more dangerous than any Earth could offer. At least, that's what they believed. Xarath activated his scanner, sweeping the area for signs of the polar bear. The device beeped as it locked onto a moving figure far ahead across the ice plains. A slow, confident smile spread across Xarath's reptilian face. "There it is," he hissed, his voice thick with anticipation. "A mere animal. And soon, another trophy for our collection." The hunters spread out, moving silently across the snow. As they approached, the figure became more distinct, a massive creature covered in a dense coat of white fur, walking with a power and grace that belied its size. Its eyes, dark and intelligent, scanned the horizon as it sniffed the cold air, sensing something amiss. Xarath signaled his team to fan out, surrounding the bear. He raised his plasma rifle, the weapon's scope zeroing in on the creature's head. But as he prepared to fire, the polar bear's head snapped around, locking its gaze onto him. Xarath hesitated, a chill running down his spine that had nothing to do with the Arctic cold. The bear's eyes held a glint of something he had never seen in a mere beast: awareness, intelligence, and a hint of challenge. "Now!" Xarath barked, and a volley of plasma bolts shot through the air, converging on the bear. But with a speed that defied its size, the bear lunged sideways, avoiding the blasts. It roared, a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet. The Kriegstall hunters felt a ripple of unease. This was no ordinary hunt. The bear charged, covering the distance between it and the nearest hunter, Sarek, in seconds. Sarek barely had time to raise his weapon before the bear's massive paw swiped at him, sending him flying through the air. He crashed into the ice, his suit's protective shields flickering as he lay dazed. The other hunters fired rapidly, their shots going wide as the bear's sudden movements threw off their aim. Xarath cursed, his confidence wavering. "Regroup," he shouted, trying to regain control. But the bear was relentless, tearing through the snow with ferocity. Another hunter, Kelleran, tried to use a shock net, aiming to entangle the creature. The bear sidestepped, grabbing the net in its powerful jaws and ripping it apart as if it were nothing more than paper. "Impossible," Xarath muttered, watching as 2 more of his team were knocked aside. He recalibrated his rifle, setting it to full power. This hunt was becoming more than just a game. The Kriegstall were not accustomed to failure, and he was determined not to let this beast vest him. He took aim again, this time focusing all his energy on a single precise shot. The bear, as if sensing the impending danger, turned its head toward him. For a moment, their eyes locked, hunter and hunted, and then Sareth fired. The plasma bolt streaked through the air, hitting the bear squarely in the shoulder. The creature roared in pain, its fur singed and smoking. But instead of retreating, it turned towards Sareth, its eyes blazing with fury. The captain felt a jolt of fear. This was not how prey was supposed to react. Before he could fire again, the bear was upon him, its massive form towering over his smaller armored figure. With a swipe of its paw, it knocked the rifle from his hands. Sareth stumbled back, drawing a plasma blade from his belt. He slashed at the bear, but it dodged, its movements almost graceful. The bear's next move was swift and decisive. It reared up, towering over Sareth, and brought its paws down with bone-crushing force. Sareth felt the impact reverberate through his suit, and he fell to the ground, gasping for breath. The bear loomed over him, its breath hot and steaming in the cold air, its dark eyes fixed on him with an almost calculating look. As the bear's massive jaws opened, Sareth closed his eyes, preparing for the end. But instead of the killing blow, he felt the weight lift off him. He opened his eyes to see the bear standing back, its gaze shifting between him and the other hunters, who were slowly getting back on their feet. The bear gave a final guttural growl that resonated through the icy landscape before turning and loping away, disappearing into the white expanse. The Krixtal hunters watched in stunned silence, their pride and confidence shattered. Sareth struggled to his feet, his body aching, his mind reeling. They had come to Earth expecting a simple hunt, but they had found something far more dangerous and profound. He stared at the spot where the bear had vanished, the reality of their situation sinking in. "We need to leave," Sareth said, his voice hoarse. "Now." The Krixtal gathered their fallen comrades and retreated to their ship, their boastful laughter replaced by a solemn silence. As the ship lifted off the ground, Sareth cast one last glance at the Arctic below, a newfound respect etched into his features. The hunt had failed, but it had left them with a lesson they would not soon forget. Earth's predators were not to be underestimated, and somewhere in the vast, icy expanse of the Arctic, a polar bear watched as the alien ship disappeared into the sky, its dark eyes reflecting the cold, endless horizon. The return of the hunters. The journey back to Jantor was a silent one. The Krixtal hunters, once proud and arrogant, were now consumed by a sense of unease. Sareth, their fearless leader, sat alone in the command chamber, his mind replaying the events of the hunt. He had faced countless beasts, many of them far larger and deadlier than the polar bear. Yet, something about this encounter gnawed at him. The bear's intelligence, its reaction to their weapons, and the way it had spared his life all pointed to a deeper understanding that was unsettling. Upon their return, the hunters were met with a grand reception. The people of Jantor had anticipated tales of conquest, expecting to see new trophies added to the Hall of Hunters. But as Sareth and his team disembarked, their solemn expressions and the absence of any spoils spoke volumes. The High Council of Jantor, a group of elder Krixtal who governed their society, summoned Sareth to explain the failure. The council chamber was a vast room, its walls lined with the trophies of past hunts, skulls, claws, and fangs of creatures from across the galaxy. Sareth stood before the council, his head held high, but his eyes betrayed the turmoil within. Captain Sareth, the head counselor, a venerable Krixtal named Torvek, began. "We sent you to Earth to bring back the most feared predator of that planet, yet you return empty-handed. What happened?" Sareth took a deep breath, recounting the events of the hunt. He spoke of the bear's intelligence, its resilience, and the moment it had spared his life. The counselors listened, their expressions unreadable, but as Sareth finished, a murmur of disbelief spread through the chamber. "Are you saying," Torvek said slowly, "that a mere animal outwitted and defeated our finest hunters?" "It was no mere animal." Kareth replied, his voice steady. This creature possessed a will and intelligence unlike any we have encountered. It could have killed us, yet it chose not to. I believe there is more to Earth's predators than we understand. The counselors exchanged glances, their skepticism evident. One of them, a younger counselor named Valor, scoffed. This is absurd. You expect us to believe that an Earth creature is capable of such things. Perhaps the tales of Earth's predators are nothing more than myths, and you were simply outmatched by your own fear. Exareth bristled at the insinuation, but held his tongue. He knew that words would not convince them. The Krixtal were a society that valued action and proof above all else. If you do not believe me, then send another team. Exareth challenged. See for yourselves what Earth has to offer. But I warn you, do not underestimate the creatures of that world. Torvek raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. We will consider your words, Sarath. But until then, you and your team are to remain here. There will be no further hunts until we have determined the truth of this matter. Exareth nodded, turning to leave the chamber. As he walked out, he felt the weight of the council's judgment bearing down on him. His honor and reputation were at stake, and he knew that the only way to prove his words was to return to Earth and face the polar bear once more. The second expedition. Therath's report on the polar bear had been met with skepticism and scorn, but it also sparked a curiosity among the counselors of Genter. The idea that a single predator could challenge their best hunters was both intriguing and alarming. They decided that a second expedition was necessary, not only to prove Exareth's claims, but to restore the honor of the Krixtal Hunting Guild. The new expedition was larger and better equipped. 20 hunters, including Xarath, were selected for this mission. They brought with them advanced tracking drones, thermal imaging equipment, and an array of weapons capable of subduing even the most formidable creatures. Xarath, though still under scrutiny, was appointed as the leader again, his first-hand experience deemed valuable. The hunters prepared for their journey with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The ship they boarded was a behemoth, designed to house not only the hunters, but also the captured specimens they expected to bring back. As they left Janter's orbit, Xarath stood at the helm, his thoughts turning once more to the polar bear that had outsmarted them. He was determined to understand this creature, not just as prey, but as a worthy opponent. After several days of travel, the ship entered Earth's atmosphere, descending once more over the icy wilderness of the Arctic. The landscape was much the same, an endless expanse of white under a sky that seemed to stretch forever. But this time, the hunters were prepared. They set up a base camp, deploying drones to scout the area and locate their target. It didn't take long for the drones to pick up signs of the polar bear. The thermal imaging showed a large heat signature moving slowly through the snow, tracking seals along the ice floes. Xarath watched the monitors, his heart quickening. There it was, the same creature that had bested them before. He could feel a mix of anticipation and respect. This time, he vowed, things would be different. The hunters moved out, following the drone's guidance. They spread out in a wide arc, encircling the area where the bear had been spotted. Xarath led the central group, his eyes scanning the horizon. The wind howled around them, carrying with it the scent of salt and snow. The Arctic felt alive, as if the land itself was aware of their presence. Suddenly, one of the drones sent an alert. The bear was close, moving towards them with a speed that defied its size. Xarath raised his hand, signaling the hunters to ready their weapons. They formed a semicircle plasma rifles raise, eyes fixed on the approaching figure. The bear came into view, its massive form emerging from the snow like a ghost. It moved with a powerful grace, each step deliberate, its eyes locked onto the intruders. Xarath held his breath. There was a moment of stillness, a silent standoff between predator and hunter. Then, with a roar, the bear charged. The hunters opened fire, plasma bolts lighting up the icy landscape. The bear dodged and weaved, its movements a blur. It was faster than before, almost as if it had learned from their last encounter. It closed the distance in seconds, barreling into the hunters with a force that sent them sprawling. Xerath swung his plasma blade, aiming for the bear's flank. The blade connected, but instead of recoiling, the bear twisted, knocking Xerath off his feet. He hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind out of him. He struggled to rise, his eyes following the bear as it tore through the line of hunters. The bear's sheer power was overwhelming. It was as if they were nothing more than insects to be swatted away. Desperation set in. Xerath grabbed a grenade from his belt, arming it with a flick of his thumb. He hurled it at the bear, the device landing at its feet. The explosion rocked the ground, sending a plume of snow and ice into the air. The bear staggered, a pained roar escaping its throat. Xerath scrambled to his feet, rallying his hunters. "Now, hit it with everything," he shouted. The hunters regrouped, unleashing a barrage of plasma fire. The bear, disoriented by the blast, tried to retreat, but the hunters pressed their advantage. Xerath could see the pain in the bear's eyes, a flicker of fear that hadn't been there before. It was bleeding, its white fur matted with dark, steaming blood. For a moment, Xerath felt a pang of guilt. The bear was a magnificent creature, a symbol of raw, untamed power. But he pushed the thought aside. They had come here to prove themselves, to reclaim their honor. There could be no room for doubt. The bear turned, making a break for the open ice. Xerath raised his rifle, taking aim at its back. He hesitated, a split-second decision that would haunt him. In that moment of hesitation, the bear lunged to the side, avoiding the fatal shot. It vanished into the blinding white, leaving the hunters standing in the aftermath of their failed attempt. Xerath cursed, lowering his weapon. They had wounded the bear, but it was still alive. The realization settled in. The bear had once again escaped, outsmarting them with its cunning and resilience. The hunters returned to their camp, frustration and exhaustion weighing heavily on their shoulders. Xerath knew they couldn't return to Jantor empty-handed again. They needed to capture the bear, to bring it back as proof of their victory. But the more he thought about it, the more he wondered, was this really about the hunt, or was it about something deeper? As night fell over the Arctic, Xerath stood outside the camp, staring into the darkness. The cold bit at his skin, but he barely noticed. The polar bear had become more than just prey. It was a challenge, a riddle that he was determined to solve. And somewhere out there, the bear was watching, waiting, its dark eyes reflecting the silent, unending night. The final confrontation. The hunters spent the next 2 days tracking the wounded bear, their frustration growing with each passing hour. The creature had vanished into the Arctic wilderness, leaving behind only faint traces of its passage. Xerath led the search tirelessly, his determination burning hotter than the plasma rifle in his hands. He knew this was their last chance. If they failed to capture the bear, the council would not be forgiving. Their honor, their status, and his reputation were all on the line. As the second day faded into night, the hunters finally found fresh tracks. The bear was heading toward a stretch of ice along the coast, where the sea met the land in a jagged line of cliffs and floes. Xerath's pulse quickened. This would be the place. The ice would limit the bear's movements, and the cliffs would provide no escape. They could corner it here and finish the hunt. The hunters moved quickly, setting up a perimeter around the ice field. Xerath directed them to position traps and energy nets, designed to immobilize the bear long enough for them to capture it. As they worked, the wind howled across the ice, carrying with it a chill that sank deep into their bones. Xerath stood at the center of the formation, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of their quarry. Hours passed. The tension grew thick, each hunter straining to hear the slightest sound. Then, without warning, the bear appeared, emerging from the shadows like a specter. It was limping, blood still matting its fur, but its eyes burned with a fierce intelligence. Xerath felt a shiver of admiration. Even wounded, the bear exuded an aura of strength and defiance. "Hold positions," Xerath ordered quietly, raising his rifle. The bear stopped, sniffing the air, its gaze sweeping over the hunters. It let out a low growl, a sound that resonated through the ice. Xerath knew that sound well. It was a challenge, a declaration of the bear's dominance. The time for stealth was over. "Engage," Xerath shouted. The hunters sprang into action, triggering the traps. Energy nets shot up from the ice, forming a glowing barrier around the bear. It roared, swiping at the nets, but the energy held, crackling with each touch. Xerath moved in, plasma blade in hand, ready to end the fight. He approached slowly, watching the bear's movements. Its eyes followed him, not with fear, but with a strange, almost understanding look. Xerath hesitated. The bear's gaze pierced through him, and in that moment, he felt a connection. This was not just a mindless predator. It was a creature of purpose, surviving against all odds in one of the harshest environments in the galaxy. He saw a reflection of himself in its defiant stance. He respected it, and perhaps it respected him. But duty and honor demanded action. Xerath steeled himself, raising his blade for the final strike. The bear lunged, its claws tearing through the nets with a surge of strength. Xerath swung his blade, but the bear was faster. It collided with him, sending him sprawling onto the ice. He felt the impact of its weight, the cold seeping into his bones. For a moment, he thought this was the end. But the bear didn't strike. It stood over him, its breath hot and steaming in the frigid air. Xerath looked up into its eyes, expecting to see rage. Instead, he saw something else: determination, and perhaps even a hint of respect. The bear's growl was low, almost gentle, as if it were sparing him. Xerath's mind raced. This was a test, a final moment of understanding between hunter and hunted. He slowly raised his hand, touching the bear's fur. It was warm, its pulse strong and steady. Xerath felt a strange sense of peace. He knew then that this hunt had never been about killing the bear. It was about proving himself, understanding the strength and spirit of a creature that had defied all odds. The bear stepped back, releasing him. Xerath rose to his feet, lowering his blade. The other hunters looked on in confusion, their weapons still trained on the bear. Xerath raised his hand, signaling them to stand down. "Let it go," Xerath said, his voice steady. "This creature has earned its place. We will not take its life." The hunters hesitated, but the respect they held for Xerath was strong. They lowered their weapons, watching as the bear turned and walked away, its form blending into the white expanse. Xerath stood silently, his heart beating with a new understanding. He had found what he was searching for, not in victory, but in respect and wisdom. As the bear disappeared into the Arctic night, Xerath knew that this was the true lesson of the hunt: to understand the value of life, even in the most formidable of creatures. To recognize that strength was not just in conquering, but in respecting and coexisting with the natural world. The hunters returned to Jantor, empty-handed, but not without honor. Xerath faced the council, his head held high. He recounted the events of the hunt, not as a failure, but as a story of understanding and respect. The council listened, and in their eyes, Xerath saw a flicker of approval. Torvek, the council elder, nodded. "You have shown us that true strength is not just in the hunt, but in the wisdom to see beyond it. The polar bear will be left in peace, a guardian of its realm." Xerath bowed, his heart swelling with pride. He had found a deeper meaning in the hunt, one that transcended the pursuit of prey. He had learned that sometimes the greatest victory was not in the taking of life, but in the understanding of it. As he left the council chamber, Xerath looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere, out there, the polar bear roamed free, a symbol of resilience, strength, and the untamed spirit of the wild. And he smiled, knowing that his journey had just begun. The end.